The Galactic Combat Academy on Vareth Station had trained warriors from 47 species over the course of 3 centuries. It had produced champions, generals, and legends. Its instructors were hard-faced veterans who had seen entire fleets shattered across the void of space, who measured competence in microseconds and failure in body counts. None of them had ever seen anything like Soraya. Instructor Darien was not the type to be impressed easily. He had 3 eye stalks, 11 years of active command experience in the Vareth Armada, and a scar running down the left side of his exoskeleton from a plasma bolt that had missed his neural cluster by a margin he still refused to calculate. He had trained Keth warriors who could bench press shuttle engines. He had trained Moran assassins who could slip through atmospheric shielding without a sensor ping. He had trained zoologisticians whose processing speeds made most computers look sluggish. He had never, in 11 years, accepted a human candidate. It wasn't prejudice. It was mathematics. Humans were fragile. Humans were slow. Humans had a ridiculous single-chambered cardiovascular system, bones that fractured under moderate stress, and nervous systems that required an embarrassing amount of sleep to function. The Galactic Combat Academy had minimum physical thresholds for a reason. The battlefield did not forgive weakness. The application of one Soraya Voss had landed on his datapad 3 months ago. 26 years old. Female. Human. From a small industrial settlement on Earth's western continent. Her test scores were, statistically, impossible. He'd had the AI run them 4 times. He'd accepted her on the 5th. The first day of the integration course, Darien stood at the front of the assessment chamber and watched 32 candidates line up in the prep formation. He let the silence stretch until it became uncomfortable, until even the Keth warriors, who could endure pressure up to 40 atmospheres, shifted slightly on their heavy feet. Then he let his gaze land on Soraya. She was small, even by human standards. She stood near the center of the line, slim and unremarkable in the standard gray bodysuit all candidates wore before they earned their kit. Her hair was dark and pulled back tight. Her eyes were unusual. Not the color, which was an ordinary shade of brown, but the quality of them. They were very still. The kind of still that Darien associated with pilots the moment before they made a decision, with surgeons the moment before they made an incision. Today's assessment, he said, is vocoder translating his clicks and hisses into standard galactic, is the Archimedean sequence. You will each face a tactical simulation that adapts to your species' optimal processing speed. The simulation will escalate every 3 seconds. Your objective is to neutralize 11 threat nodes before the sequence reaches maximum complexity. He paused. The average Academy candidate completes 7. The Academy record, held by a Moran named Thessavar, is 10. Any questions? Silence. Good. He raised his primary manipulator. Begin. What happened next? Darien would replay in his memory for the rest of his career. The chamber floor illuminated. The holographic threat nodes snapped into existence. 11 pulsing red markers scattered across a 3-dimensional grid. The candidates surged forward, each moving at the speed their biology allowed, reaching for their interface panels, beginning the calculation and response cycle the sequence demanded. Soraya did not move. For exactly 0.6 seconds, she stood completely still. Darien's secondary eye stalk tracked her automatically. He had seen candidates freeze before. It was not unusual in the first assessment. The sensory overload of the holographic environment could lock up even experienced trainees. He was already calculating which remedial track she would be assigned to. Then she moved. Later, the playback analysis would show that Soraya neutralized the first node at 0.7 seconds into the simulation, the second at 1.1 seconds, the third and fourth simultaneously at 1.4 seconds, using an interface technique that the Academy's pattern recognition system had never recorded before, a cross-link maneuver that the system initially flagged as an input error because it did not exist in any documented tactical manual. By the time the fastest Keth candidate had neutralized his second node, Soraya was on her 8th. By the time the Moran candidate had reached her 3rd, Soraya had finished. Total elapsed time, 4.3 seconds. 11 nodes, all neutralized. 0 errors. A simulation that escalated every 3 seconds had not even reached its first escalation point. The chamber went absolutely silent. 31 candidates stood frozen, their hands still on their interface panels, staring at the blank grid where the threat nodes had been. The simulation had terminated early. It had never terminated early before. The system didn't have a protocol for it. Soraya lowered her hands and turned to look at Darian. She did not look smug. She did not look proud. She looked patient, as though she had expected to finish and was simply waiting to see what came next. Darian's vocoder clicked 3 times before he remembered to engage translation. "Candidate Voss," he said. "Instructor," she replied. "Explain your third and fourth neutralization." She did, calmly, in precise technical language, describing a simultaneous recursive loop that bypassed the sequential processing architecture the simulation was designed to reward. She had recognized, in that 0.6 seconds of stillness, that the sequence was structured for species who processed threats linearly, one at a time, in order of assessed priority. She had decided, in 0.6 seconds, to process them non-linearly. The nodes share 3 underlying frequency matrices, she said. If you collapse the matrices simultaneously, the nodes don't need to be neutralized individually. The system reads the collapse as a cascading neutralization. It's like, she paused, searching for the right analogy. It's like you don't need to cut down 11 trees if you can remove the root system they all share. Darian stared at her for a long moment. "No one has ever identified that structural overlap," he said. "I know," she said. "I could tell by the way the simulation was designed. It assumed we wouldn't look for it." The story spread through Verith Station the way remarkable things always spread, first in disbelief, then in furious repetition. Candidates whispered about it in the mess hall. Instructors pulled up the playback in private. The simulation engineers ran a full audit of the assessment system, looking for glitches, finding none. In the weeks that followed, Darian pushed Soraya harder than he had pushed any candidate in his career. He doubled her cognitive load assessments. He ran her through multi-domain simulations designed for species with parallel neural architectures. He put her in zero-gravity tactical environments, chemical atmosphere environments, communication blackout environments. She adapted. Every time. Not perfectly. She failed, sometimes, and she failed with a kind of ferocious focus, analyzing the failure before she had even finished falling. She would push herself back to her feet, recalibrate, and go again. Darian, watching her one evening as she ran a voluntary night session on the obstacle course, found himself thinking of something his own instructor had told him many years ago. The most dangerous soldier is not the one who is strongest. It is the one who refuses to accept the shape of the problem as given. Humans, he was beginning to understand, had a peculiar relationship with problems. Other species, including his own, approached a difficult situation by optimizing within its structure, by becoming better and faster at doing the thing the problem required them to do. Humans looked at the structure itself and asked why it had to be that way. It was, he thought, probably a survival trait. A species that had clawed its way out of a single gravity well, with no natural armor, no venom, no echolocation, no exoskeleton. A species that had made it out of the dark and into the stars using nothing but biology's most impractical feature, an oversized pattern recognition engine that never stopped asking questions. That species had learned, at a cellular level, that the shape of the problem was not sacred. On graduation day, Darian called Soraya to the front of the assembled class. The ceremony was standard. The commendation was standard. The rank insignia was standard. What was not standard was what Darian said afterward, quietly, in the corridor outside the hall, where only she could hear. "You broke a record that stood for 60 years, he said. In 4.3 seconds. The question I want you to carry forward is not how you did it." She waited. "The question," he said, "is what you will do when you face a simulation that was designed by someone who already knows that trick." Soraya looked at him steadily, with those very still eyes. "Then I'll find the next one," she said simply. Darian's vocoder clicked. It was the sound, for his species, of quiet laughter. "Yes," he said. "You will." He watched her walk down the corridor toward her first assignment. One small human in a galaxy that had not been built for her. And he thought, not for the first time, that the galaxy had not entirely understood what that meant. It would.